Hey, folks. As we edge closer to Christmas Day, I am always still thinking of the process leading up to Christmas and the process and the journey that leads up to Jesus' birth, especially in the gospel narratives. I think in our culture we tend to brush aside or minimize the process of leading up to Christmas. We want to hurry and rush and get it here so that we can um, experience experience the festivity, experience all the stuff, and then sometimes we want it to rush and get here so we can get past it and move beyond it and move on with our lives. But in the gospel narratives, the process, the journey leading up to Jesus' birth plays a significant role in the whole story, in both Matthew and Luke. And as I think about the journey and the process leading up to Jesus' birth and how important that is, and how that's what Advent's all about, I think of Joseph. Joseph, in the stories in Matthew and Luke, is the earthly human, the earthly person who bears the responsibility of fathering Jesus. Even though Jesus wasn't born from Joseph, yet Joseph is responsible as the father, as the one married to Mary, to see to it that Mary and Jesus are safe. In both Matthew and Luke, Mary and Joseph and the unborn baby Jesus journey considerable distance in uncertain, unpredictable circumstances on the Roman roads where anything can happen. And you're not safe necessarily, especially if you're a young married couple with a baby, you're not safe. And I think of Joseph and the burden he might have bore in terms of feeling responsible, and maybe the burden he might have carried worrying about whether or not he was going to mess the whole thing up. And I think of that's how God comes into the world in the Advent story, entrusting his presence into the hands of this young married couple who really didn't know what they were doing. Yet God entrusted his presence and his coming into the world into their hands. And yes, God oversaw the whole thing, but yet Mary and Joseph probably still lived in some uncertainty, in some sense of worry that they were going to mess it up. But yet God wasn't worried about that. And I think that's still how God works, that God comes into the world through our imperfect lives. Even though we don't know what we're doing, God works in through our lives. And even though we feel like we might mess it up, God's not worried about that. That's what I think of in the process leading up to Jesus' birth today, and want you to reflect on that today as we think about Advent and the journey and the process leading up to the coming of God into our world. God's not worried that we're going to mess it up. In fact, God entrusts his presence and the experience of his presence into our human hands and into our lives. That's how God works, through us. And it still happens today. Let that give you encouragement and hope today, this Advent. We'll see you. Have a great day.